Okay, welcome back to another scenario. Today we're going to be looking at what would happen if the East African Federation forms and then creates an empire. So if you didn't know, the East African Federation is this proposed union between definitely these countries, but also probably the DRC, and maybe like some other ones might want to join. But yeah. So we're going to see that this does occur in this scenario. So we're going to see these core members sort of begin their thing. And we'll also include South Sudan because they do want to join. So there we have the East African Federation. Very large and powerful African country, I would assume. So they're gonna get to work on forming an empire now. So there's a few easy targets, but probably the easiest is definitely going to be Malawi, because I mean, what are these guys gonna do really? So obviously this scenario, like if this actually started happening and this union formed and started making itself an empire, it would probably get like nuked, but or at least like the US would probably like start, doing their US things. But yeah, anyway, we're just gonna disregard that because that would make the scenario really boring. Anyway, they are going to begin to push into Malawi, going around the lake, and they really just have to march down. Like it's literally just one front line. So maybe like here, because then you can go down or across. But yeah, regardless, Malawi gets obliterated and then fully annexed. So goodbye. Anyway, they are now going to go after Somalia. So this war continues just like the last one for a little bit, with these guys just pushing right on in without much difficulty. However, we see that this quickly starts becoming a little bit of a larger war, as we have Somaliland rebels up here start to break off. And to make matters even worse, we then see that another country, Ethiopia, is going to join this war because they want to grab up some land. So they are pretty powerful country, so they are easily able to cut across Somalia, who by this point has completely collapsed. Their government, at least. And now it looks like this. And so, in this peace treaty, we are first going to see that the East African Federation, what the East African Federation gets. Their land, well, their new border is going to be right here. Hold on, there we go. Then we have Somaliland gain its independence. We'll just give them this border, because I don't want to make it go like all the way up here. That would look weird. Somaliland gets their independence, and the rest of this land is going over to Ethiopia, who finally has a coastline. So, good on them. Anyway, the East African Federation is looking decently larger now, so you're going to go after a slightly more powerful country, being Mozambique. Still, this is probably a pretty easy war. They first focus around Lake Malawi, which goes pretty well. Then come down to the southern tip here, where there's a bunch of troops stationed already, and they do this little maneuver that cuts the country in three. This northern half is where, or third, is where they put a lot of their military, but a decent amount goes down here because there's a lot of troops trapped over here, and they are eventually squashed out. Also start sending some more down here. The northern chunk falls, and then the southern one is soon to follow. So, in this peace treaty, this will be the first country that does not fully die. Let's just do that and that. The Mozambique Ians will be left a country, but just a very small one down here. And it's also a puppet state, so hooray. These guys are definitely very East African now, and they're going to continue to go east, because they're now going to go after a naval invasion of Madagascar. They're also going to go after these surrounding islands. Now these might be like Comoros or Mauritius. I don't really know where they are, but whatever these islands are, they're invading them as well. So this is their first test of their navy. For their first like real naval test. I mean, there's Lake Malawi, but okay, yeah. And this just goes pretty well for them. Take over both these islands, and then Madagascar dies. I know one of their, I forget which. It's either this side or this side has all their has like most of their population, but I don't remember which. And anyway, Madagascar and these islands are fully annexed. So as you can see, the East African Federation, if we include their puppet state, is starting to be very large. They're 105,000 pixels. For reference, that's like a third of China. So that's pretty good for them. I mean, there's a Mercator projection and all, so in fact, they're probably like slightly more than a third of China. Hold on. Okay, it was just a UPS guy. But anyway, we can see that they are getting pretty powerful. So some of these countries are getting pretty afraid of them. So there's two routes these countries can take. They can either unite with them to, not get invaded by them, or they can like form an alliance to be protected from them. So we're going to see that, first of all, DRC already like kind of in real life wants to join this, I believe. So they are not terribly hard to convince to join. So that adds a lot of land and population. And these guys' next target is definitely going to be Zambia. And they start lining up their troops on the border. But Zambia is going to create some defensive alliance with all of these countries. We'll include these guys as well, I guess. Also, for some reason, there's like a bunch of weird looking pixels. So let's just redo that. Yes, much better. Oh yeah, this is also part of Angola, if you didn't know. Anyway, though, you'll see that they have a very big threat to them down here. Thankfully, there's one country that didn't join us, which is Eswatini. And yeah, you can guess how that goes. They just make it into another puppet state. Anyway, we now see that they're going to turn their attention up north, where Sudan is actively in a civil war right now, I believe. So, invading them is not going to be too difficult, because the country is already very divided. So, they start pushing in, but once again, Ethiopia is going to join in. This time they're yellow instead of green, but oh well. And they start pushing up as well. They also roll straight through Eritrea, just to make this easier. And in fact, we see Egypt join in on this as well. And I'm pretty sure Egypt and Ethiopia have some tensions because, like, Ethiopia wants to dam the Nile River, which would not be good for Egypt or something. But they're going to but this isn't really them, like, working together. It's just, in the sense that they're, like, being allies. It's just them working together to take out this other common enemy. Although it's not really even an enemy, it's just a victim. But yeah, Sudan, actively in civil war and now being invaded, is going to crumble. And so, in this peace treaty, first of all, Ethiopia will be taking over all of Eritrea. They will also invade Djibouti. Obviously, that's over pretty quick. And now, as for actual Sudan, we're going to see that they get split up between the three invaders. So all the border disputes between Egypt and Sudan are definitely over now. And yeah. Vroom, vroom, vroom. Okay, with these borders gone, we can now actually do it. So, Ethiopia's new border, I forgot to do this, Ethiopia's new border is going to be going up pretty far like this. Whoa, not like that. But yeah, they almost look like the gold team from Aegis Priswick, so you might not know what that is, but if you do, then you know that's probably not a good thing. I mean, I did it again. We can probably just erase this. Hiya. So, yes. These guys now look like this. And then the rest of the country is going to have to be split up between these guys and Egypt. And their new border is just going to be like around here. So that looks pretty ugly, but oh well. South Sudan has gotten a lot of actual Sudan, which probably doesn't go well, because I think the whole reason they broke away from Sudan is because they didn't like them, but oh well. Anyway, Ethiopia, the real star of this video apparently, is going to also be invading another country, being Somaliland, which was just formed, but it's pretty weak, so yeah. And so neither of these countries like the African Union, but they also don't like each other. So we're going to see something kind of interesting. We see that Egypt joins the Southern African Alliance, despite not being South African. And we're going to see that Ethiopia goes ahead and makes their own, which is both like anti-Egypt and anti-Blue Team at the same time, or anti-East African and anti-Blue Alliance. So their members are going to be, maybe not Nigeria, but yeah. Their members are going to be these guys, which does leave a nice opportunity for the red team over here. Kind of running out of colors now, but we're going to see that the Red East African Federation, East Africa, that means more like Central African. Well, I guess this is the center. I don't really know what you would call this at this point. But yeah, these guys are going to invade all of these 3 countries, and these guys get absolutely curb stomped. There is no hope for them. And yeah, goodbye. And so in this peace treaty, we see that they get fully annexed. This is probably pretty awkward now, but yeah. So we have these 3 alliances, well, these 2 alliances and this giant empire here. This border is like really thin. Maybe we can fix that. Or, well, you know, now it looks a little too thick, but oh well. Better than too thin, I guess. But yeah, we have these 2 big alliances and this one giant red empire. And yeah, obviously things are not going to go well. And we see that over here, this, you know, awkward little thing is going to get a little bit too awkward. And these guys kind of have a little standoff, some troops on the borders of each, and a couple shots get fired, and this is seen as very angry. This is seen as an act of war, and so you see that the blue team is going to go ahead and declare war on the East African Empire after they lose this, of course. So that's not good. To make matters worse, with these guys realizing that this is a good opportunity, the yellow team, as I said, realizes that this is a good opportunity to also invade the East African Empire. However, when Egypt over here is invading the East African Empire, they sort of accidentally also invade Ethiopia. And yeah, we now have a big old 3-way war between the blue guys, the red, and the yellow. Starting off, the red team is going to do pretty swell down here in the south, with them pushing all the way into like Zambia and Angola, and yeah. However, the blue team does have South Africa, who is pretty powerful, so things are not going to go well for their puppet states. Up here in the north, you see that Egypt is going to continue pushing into Ethiopia, but these guys do get into a stalemate eventually around here. They do also then make a little push into Libya, and as well as just going down to Sudan, and maybe like Chad. Over in this area, though, the yellow team is doing a much better job. And this half of it manages to connect up over here with Ethiopia. And that cuts off the Sudanese part, so that is quick to fall. Now, Egypt is completely, surrounded, but they are pretty strong. However, they are not immortal, so they do get pushed back a decent amount. Mostly just to their border, but not completely. Over here, East African Federation is pushing down to Angola and taking over a whole lot of it. Move on down to this panhandle of Namibia and all of that. Make a big little encirclement over here and take all those troops. Their puppet states do fall, and we see that Madagascar is actually liberated by South Africa. And from here, they're going to use Madagascar as a base to make several little naval invasions along the coast. It's eventually coalesce into one big one, which is a pretty big threat to these guys. Anyway, up here, they actually do manage to push back a little bit. They start a spearhead over in Cameroon / the Central African Republic and cut off a lot of troops over by the coast. So that's good for them. Ethiopia does make a substantial push down here into former Somalia. And we see that the East African Federation no longer has any coast on East Africa. How funny. Anyway, these guys are kind of getting sandwiched. This half of the yellow team, as we see that Egypt is now focusing in on this area with most of their troops, and things are not looking good when they get split into multiple halves again. Now a considerable portion of pretty much all of this is just desert. So, but Egypt is able to do all of this, which is pretty good for them. We then see that the East African Republic, they managed to push them back by a decent amount, and also isolate all of these guys, and take them all out. So yeah, things are not looking too good for the yellow team. Over down the south, though, we do see that things are looking good for the blue team, as all these guys are able to make a pretty big counteroffensive since East Africa is pushing a lot of its troops up here. East Africa does go slightly defensive, with them reclaiming their core coast, like that. Anyway, Ethiopia now starts a big old push down to Lake Victoria, which is successful, and then go over to Lake Tan, whatever it's called. It's spelled like Tanganyika. It's probably not how it's pronounced, but something like that. And yeah, so this, you could arguably say that they're split in two now. Not really though, because they occupy this area, and plus they also still control this lake, so only by water, and even then they occupy this area, so it's debatable. Anyway, Egypt's strategy is to just capitulate all of these countries and then deal with this later. And we're really going to hope that works, because, well, they did eliminate all of these countries. However, Ethiopia is making a substantial push up to them right now. Not in the Sinai Peninsula. Whoa. Egypt takes over the entire ocean, I guess. Yeah. Anyway, East Africa is now going to go mainly on the defensive and try and push these guys out. I do need to make this their puppet state again. So yeah, they push these guys out. They also reclaim their puppet states. If I can get the color right. Sure. Bam. Yeah, they just reclaim all of their land. But in turn, that kind of let these guys reclaim all of their land, except for this. So, yeah. And now they are officially split in two, which is not good for them. However, over here, Egypt now pulls all of their troops out of here, starts throwing them at Ethiopia as fast as they can. They travel down. Whoa. Nope. We'll get it eventually. Yep. So yeah, they make an encirclement, take it over, then start reclaiming all their lost land, and now start pushing into Eritrea. We now see that there are going to be some rebels, some Somaliland rebels, as well as like Eritrea popping up over here. So that's not good. And pretty quickly we see that Ethiopia falls into a civil war. Someone just honked. And yeah, we have this group over here, which also has a lot of Somalis, I guess. But yeah, they start trying to overthrow the government because they think it's failing them. And so with this civil war, the entire Ethiopian military begins to fracture and collapse. And we see that they completely start to fail. And they're now completely pushed out and then defeated. These guys are going to make one last push down here and do, well, no, they aren't even able to do that. Let's just say this front line looks like that, because that doesn't look that realistic. But yeah, so once the war gets to this point, we see that all these countries, now that the yellow line is out, these guys kind of just agree to make peace because they don't want to keep fighting. So we now get to look at this peace treaty. So in this peace treaty, we can see that a lot has happened. So starting in the north, Egypt has grown gargantuan. They took a nice chunk out of Libya and Ethiopia. The border with East Africa was kept the same because there wasn't any invading. At the end front lines. Then over here we see that a lot of Cameroon and Central African Republic were taken by these guys. They also made a puppet state out of Chad, although this small chunk went to Libya for some reason. Anyway, over here we see that East Africa also took a nice chunk out of Ethiopia. And the two rebel groups each got their own countries. Somali half and the Eritrean half of Ethiopia. And laying down here, East Africa was forced to liberate their two puppet states, although they did not gain their former territory. And Zambia and Zimbabwe both got a little bit of land out of them, although they did get Angola's little exclave up there. So yeah, East Africa made it out of this war pretty big, and them and Egypt are probably going to be fighting for control or influence over Africa, but that's not going to be in this video because this video is about to end.